All right, let's talk about something that's happening right now. A really fundamental change to how the internet works. We're going to connect some dots today between events you've probably heard about, but maybe never seen as part of one big story. So, let's get into it.
This quote pretty much nails it. That original dream of the internet, this wide-open, decentralized space for everyone, well, that dream is fading. It's being replaced piece by piece with a system of gates and gatekeepers, where governments and huge corporations are the ones calling all the shots.
So the big question is, how did we get to this point? I mean, it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't just one big decision. It was more like a slow crawl, a series of legal cases, new laws, and tech shifts that have all started to merge together. And in this explainer, we're going to trace that exact path, starting with the secrets the government really wants to keep.
Okay, first up, the government's playbook for controlling information. This is where the state really shows its power, dusting off old laws and using them in brand new ways to clamp down on transparency and really control the whole narrative. And there's no better place to start than with a name I guarantee you know, Edward Snowden.
So back in 2013, Edward Snowden basically pulled back the curtain on what the NSA was up to. He showed the world that governments were secretly collecting just staggering amounts of our phone records and internet data. And this, as you can imagine, set off a global firestorm about privacy. But here's the key part. Look at how the government responded. They didn't just reform the programs, they charged Snowden under the Espionage Act. This also triggered what we now call the Snowden effect, a massive breakdown of trust in U.S. tech companies, because suddenly everyone realized their data was anything but private.
And the Espionage Act itself, wow, it's such a critical piece of this puzzle. You see, it's this really old law, originally written to go after spies selling military secrets to enemy nations during wartime. But today, it's being aimed at whistleblowers and journalists who publish information that we, the public, probably have a right to know. Critics point out that its language is so vague it can be used to silence almost anyone, which puts it in direct conflict with free speech.
And that leads us directly to the next major escalation in this story, the case of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. See, if Snowden was the source, the whistleblower, then Assange was the publisher, and his prosecution took this whole thing one giant step further. Now it wasn't just about the leak, it was about targeting the very act of journalism itself. The U.S. government's case against Assange hinged on things like encouraging a source and protecting that source's identity. Things that are literally journalism 101. And when you do that, you create what's known as a chilling effect. Basically, if journalists start to fear they could be prosecuted just for doing their jobs, how many future whistleblowers are just going to stay silent? It's a powerful way for the state to keep a monopoly on what information gets out.
Okay, so that's the state's angle. But governments aren't the only ones in this game. Let's pivot now to the corporate world, because the long fight against online piracy created a completely new playbook for control. And it all started with one infamous figure, Kim.com.
Before the whole mega upload saga, dealing with piracy was mostly a civil issue. Big companies would sue platforms for money. But with Kim.com, the Department of Justice completely changed the rules. They treated mega upload not as just a platform, but as a worldwide criminal organization. This was a huge shift. For the very first time, the owners of a platform were being held criminally responsible for what their users did, based on the argument that the site was designed to encourage it. That set an incredibly powerful new precedent.
And this is where it all starts to come together. This is the absolute core of what we're talking about today. It's the point where those two separate forces, the government's push for surveillance and the new legal risks for corporations, begin to fuse into one single, powerful system of digital control.
And the perfect example of this merger is the UK's Online Safety Act. It puts a duty of care on platforms to protect their users, and if they don't comply, they face absolutely massive fines. Now, on the surface, who's going to argue with protecting kids? But critics are calling it a censor's charter, because to avoid those fines, companies now have a huge incentive to just delete anything controversial, even if it's perfectly legal. And worse, they're being pushed to scan private messages, which breaks encryption, and to identify every single user on their platform. And that last part creates this massive paradox, right? If you want to reliably keep kids from seeing adult content, you first have to know who the kids are. And really, the only way to do that for sure is to verify the age of everyone. This isn't a small tweak. It fundamentally rewires the nature of being online. And just look at the ways we're told to verify our age. Uploading your government ID, using a face scan, these methods create these giant, tempting databases of our most private information just sitting there, waiting for hackers or government agencies. So this push for age verification, which sounds so reasonable, becomes a direct threat to online anonymity, a principle that has been a cornerstone of free expression for everyone from political dissidents and repressive regimes to just regular people looking up sensitive health info.
Now, to be fair, there are some really smart people working on tech solutions, like something called zero-knowledge proofs. The idea is actually pretty simple. Instead of showing your driver's license to every website, you show it just once to a trusted third party. They then give you a secure digital token. So when a website asks for your age, it just pings the third party, which sends back a simple yes or no. Your actual data never gets shared. It's brilliant, but the problem is, this tech just isn't ready for prime time yet.
So we have state surveillance and we have corporations being forced to monitor us. But there's one final, incredibly powerful piece to this puzzle: the quiet, unaccountable power of financial companies to act as the ultimate judge, jury, and executioner online. This is what we're calling the financial kill switch. Think about companies like Stripe, PayPal, or Visa. They can, at any moment, decide to stop processing payments for a business based on their own internal brand risk policies. This isn't about what's legal. It's about what they decide is high risk. It happened to game developers selling totally legal, teen-rated games. A pressure group complained, and poof, the payment processors pulled the plug. It's a type of censorship that completely bypasses any laws, any courts, any public discussion at all. So when we use a phrase like online Armageddon, we're not talking about some big, fiery explosion. We're talking about this quiet, almost invisible, systemic erosion of our control, our privacy, and even our sense of ownership in the digital world. And this really gets to the heart of it all. What does it even mean to own something digitally? You think you own that game you bought on Steam or that movie on your Amazon account? The hard truth is, you probably don't. What you have is a license to access it, and that license can be revoked at any time if a platform or payment processor gets nervous. Your ownership is fragile. It's an illusion. So let's put it all on the table and see how it all connects. The Snowden case normalized state surveillance. The Assange case started criminalizing journalism. Kim.com's case blurred the lines for platform liability. Then, the UK Online Safety Act comes along and legally forces platforms to become surveillance partners for the state. Age verification gives them the tool to end anonymity for good. And floating above it all, you have the payment processors acting as a private financial kill switch. You see, each one builds on the last, creating this one unified system of control. Now, I know that's a pretty bleak picture, but this outcome, it's not a done deal. It's not inevitable. So what can be done? What does the path forward even look like if we want to reclaim some of that digital autonomy? Well, the solution has to come from multiple angles at once. It means we have to reform these ancient laws like the Espionage Act so they protect whistleblowers instead of just punishing them. It means demanding real, honest-to-God transparency from the tech and financial companies that have become our digital gatekeepers. And on the tech side, it means pushing for and adopting privacy-first tools and fighting like hell to protect strong encryption from government backdoors. Which really leaves us with this final, massive question. We've seen how all these different forces are converging to build a more controlled, less free, and less private internet. Is this slide into what some call digital authoritarianism just inevitable? Is it the price of progress? Or can we, through a real, conscious, and collective effort, actually reclaim the autonomy that we are so quickly losing? The choice, for now, at least, is still ours.